The large gates of Chief Ijag's mansion in Ikoyi opened every morning with robotic precision, but inside the house, nothing was ever quite orderly. Chief Ijag Okonkwo, once the towering oil magnate of Lagos, now sat day after day in a plush wheelchair that mocked his former power. At 58, he had lost the use of his legs after a mysterious accident 2 years prior, one no one dared speak of, not even in whispers. The staff often speculated, but the truth remained locked behind his silence and bitterness. His house was a cold empire ruled by mood swings and sharp words. He insulted the gardener for breathing too loudly, shouted at the chef for too much salt, and fired 3 maids in 1 week for no real offense. But only one person remained, Eniton, the housemaid from Ijibuode, whom he had once referred to as the most useless fly on a rotting wall. Eniton had been working for Chief Ijag for nearly 8 months now. She was in her early 20s, slim, with a face that rarely smiled but eyes that glowed with quiet resilience. Each morning, she rose at 5 a.m., cleaned the living room before his eyes opened, and arranged his medicine cabinet meticulously. Though he never said thank you, she still greeted him with a bow and gentle good morning, sir, every day. On most days, he'd grumble in response, muttering things like, "You're still here," or "Don't break anything today." The house was a gallery of silence and tension. The only sound apart from the humming air conditioner was the screech of Ijag's motorized wheelchair across the marble floor and the occasional bark of command. Despite this, Eniton remained unshaken. While the other staff feared his temper, she seemed immune to it, or perhaps she simply believed in something beyond the man he had become. One afternoon, while polishing the glass center table in the main living room, Eniton overheard Ijag on a call. His voice was low, strained, and filled with pain, an unfamiliar tone. "I don't want visitors, especially not her," he said, then paused. "Tell her I'm dead if you must." A moment of silence passed. "She made me this way." Eniton didn't flinch or pry, but something inside her stirred. For the first time, she saw not the tyrant but a broken man hiding behind a fortress of pride. Still, that didn't stop his cruelty. That evening, she brought him dinner, carefully seasoned and warmed, and he sneered at it. "Are you trying to kill me with salt, fool? Are your ears for decoration?" She bowed and tipped the tray without a word, walked to the kitchen, and began preparing another meal, her hand steady, her heart undisturbed. But even the walls seemed to wonder, why did she stay? The other staff whispered behind her back, "Na ja she dey use. Or she dey wait make he die make she collect something?" But Eniton had no grand scheme. Her father, a retired schoolteacher, had taught her that kindness was not weakness, and her mother's last words had been, "Help those who hurt, for they are the ones who need it most." Eniton did not see a tyrant, she saw a man in a cage of his own making. And whether he acknowledged it or not, she would stay, until she saw light in that darkness or was forced to leave. Unknown to both of them, this small act of defiant kindness would one day become the very thing that would change both their lives forever. For now, she was just a maid, but the wind was beginning to turn. The sun had barely risen over Lagos when Eniton stepped into Chief Ijag's bedroom with his breakfast tray, pap, akara, and his usual small thermos of bitter leaf tea. The aroma drifted toward him before she spoke, yet he didn't lift his eyes from the newspaper on his lap. "Why do you insist on this daily ritual?" he asked, not kindly but with the weary tone of a man who had forgotten how to be grateful. "Are you hoping I'll suddenly find you useful?" Eniton didn't respond with anger or sarcasm. She merely adjusted the tray on his bedside table and arranged his cutlery with quiet precision. "I hope you eat today, sir," she said, bowing slightly. "The doctor said your iron is still low." Her voice was calm, as if she hadn't just been insulted. He grunted in response, eyes still locked on the newspaper, fingers twitching as though suppressing emotions too tangled for words. Eniton left the room, her slippers sliding softly across the tiled floor. In the hallway, the other maid, Adesawa, waited with folded arms and a raised brow. "The man doesn't deserve your kindness," she muttered. "Every day you behave like Florence Nightingale. One day you go regret am." Eniton didn't respond. Instead, she turned back to collect the empty tray she knew would remain untouched. But to her surprise, a few bites of akara were missing. That small shift, insignificant to most, was, to her, a sign that perhaps her patience was not in vain. Still, Chief Ajag remained as harsh as ever. Later that evening, he rang the bell furiously when his charger cord wasn't within arm's reach. "What do you even do in this house if not misplace everything?" he shouted as Eniton rushed in. "Sorry, sir," she said, picking it up from behind the side drawer and offering it to him. He snatched it from her without eye contact. Eniton didn't expect a thank you, she never did. But that night, as she sat outside on the veranda peeling yam under the moonlight, she whispered a prayer. Not for herself, but for him. "Heal him, Lord. Whatever broke him, touch it," she murmured. The compound was silent except for the distant sounds of Danfo horns and street hawkers calling out their wares. Somewhere deep inside that house, a broken man fought demons no one else could see. And somewhere even deeper, he began, almost unconsciously, to wonder why this girl had not yet given up on him. Rain fell like heavy curtains over the city of Lagos, and thunder cracked through the sky as though heaven itself were angry. Inside the mansion, darkness swallowed the hallways, the generator had tripped, and PHCN had done what it always did, vanish when needed. The staff huddled in their quarters with candles and battery-powered radios, but Chief Ajak, trapped in his upstairs bedroom, sat in silence. The battery on his phone was dead, and he'd refused to let Eniton remain in his room when the lights first flickered. "Leave. You're not my nurse," he had snapped. So she obeyed. But now, with thunder booming and shadows dancing across the ceiling, Ajak's mind began playing cruel tricks on him. When he attempted to move toward the shelf to find his medication, the front wheel of his chair caught on the edge of a mat. In a horrifying moment, the chair lurched, tipped, and slammed to the ground. The tray table crashed, glass breaking beneath him. "Ah!" he cried out, a strangled sound more of pain than fear. "Help! Somebody!" But no one heard. Or worse, no one wanted to. Downstairs, Eniton had just finished her prayers and was folding a blanket over herself when she heard something. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent. Her ears had learned to listen differently. She picked up her rechargeable lamp and climbed the stairs, her slippers wet from the leaking corridor. When she opened his door, what she saw broke her heart. Chief Ajak was on the ground, twisted slightly, breathing heavily, with a smear of blood on his elbow and glass under his arm. Why did you come?" he groaned, face contorted with pride and pain. "Because no one else would," Eniton replied, kneeling carefully beside him. She didn't wait for permission. She placed a blanket under his legs, gathered the pieces of glass with her hands, and wiped the blood gently with cotton. "Stay away," he whispered, his voice weak. "Don't pity me." She looked at him then, not as a boss, not as a broken man, but as someone God had placed in her life. "It's not pity," she said. "It's compassion." He looked away. That night, as the rain danced against the windows and the generator remained silent, Eniton stayed in the room, watching over the man who didn't know how to say thank you. And though neither of them spoke again until dawn, something deeper than words was exchanged. The following afternoon brought an unexpected storm, not of rain, but of history. Her name was Belinda. Tall, fierce, and reeking of old wealth and newer cruelty, she arrived at the mansion without warning, her heels clicking on the tiles like war drums. The moment she stepped into the living room, the atmosphere shifted. Eniton had just set down a tray of sliced pineapples when Belinda brushed past her like dust. "Still feeding you fruit like a child, Ajak," she said, her voice smooth and venom-laced. Ajak, seated stiffly in his wheelchair, gripped the armrest. "What do you want, Belinda?" he asked coldly. She laughed, removing her sunglasses to reveal eyes that sparkled with malice. "Just wanted to see how the mighty have fallen. Or rather, been rolled." Eniton stood back, unsure if she should stay or leave. "You can go," Ajak said quietly to her. But she didn't move. She saw his hands trembling slightly, his jaw clenched, his dignity cornered. So she stayed. Belinda turned to Eniton, examining her from head to toe. "And who is this one?" Another charity case? Or are you betting the help now? Eniton didn't flinch. I'm the maid, madam. But I also protect what remains in this house. Belinda sneered. Protect? From what memory? She stepped closer to Ajak, her tone suddenly lower. You know what you lost. And you know why you lost it. Ajak looked away. Eniton, unable to remain silent, stepped forward. Madam, if you came to gloat, then you've done it. But you should leave now. You don't belong in this house. Belinda blinked. The nerve of a maid. But something in Eniton's voice, measured, calm, yet firm, disarmed her. You'll regret this, Belinda whispered, then walked out, her perfume lingering like poison. Ajak stared at the door long after she left. You shouldn't have done that, he muttered. Eniton turned to him. Someone had to. For the first time, his eyes softened. Not a word of thanks, but a nod, small, nearly invisible, but real. A tiny crack had formed in the wall around his heart. 2 days later, Dr. Amos arrived with lab results and concern etched deep in his brows. Chief Ajak's condition was deteriorating, not just physically, but emotionally. Chief, your cortisol levels are high. Stress, depression, and your refusal to take physiotherapy seriously are killing you slowly, the doctor said, exasperated. You've got to let people help. Especially her, he added, glancing at Eniton who stood quietly by the window. Ajak snorted. She's just a maid. Dr. Amos sighed. Sometimes, it's the just people who save us. You're not fighting your body anymore, you're fighting your own pride. The room fell silent. The air conditioner hummed, the walls seemed to lean in, listening. Eniton turned and walked toward them. I won't leave, sir, she said softly. Even if you shout every day. Even if you never say a kind word. I'll keep showing up, until you find yourself again. Later that evening, Ajak stared at his reflection in the hallway mirror. He didn't recognize the man looking back, weak, pale, haunted. Behind him, Eniton laid out his nightwear, her movements fluid and respectful. Why, he asked suddenly. Why haven't you run like the others? She paused but didn't turn. Because you're not a monster. Just a man who forgot how to hope. For the first time, he felt his throat tighten. Not from sickness, but from something far more terrifying, emotion. That night, for the first time in 2 years, Chief Ajak Okonkwo wept. Silently. Alone. While in the maid's quarters, Eniton prayed again, this time not just for his healing, but for his heart to find its way home. Chief Ajak sat quietly in the shaded corner of the living room, the morning sunlight casting thin lines across his face. His eyes were hollow, and his thoughts drifted to places he had locked away. Eniton sat nearby, silently shelling egusi seeds. It had become a morning ritual, her presence was constant now, no longer a background figure but an anchor in the storm of his memories. He turned slightly toward her. Do you ever wonder why a man like me ended up in a wheelchair? He asked. It was the first time he'd invited her into his personal story. Eniton paused, then shook her head gently. No, sir. I just figured, pain doesn't always need explanation. He chuckled bitterly. Well, mine came with betrayal. From my own blood. And so, he told her about his brother, Dominic, the only family he had left. Years ago, they'd built a company together. It thrived. But greed crept in, and one fateful night, while Ajak was inspecting a site alone, a brake cable was cut. The jeep rolled. Downhill. Into a wall, he said, his voice low, haunted. Dominic claimed it was a freak accident. But I saw the footage. I saw him. He knew. Eniton dropped a seed. Her chest ached for him, not for the accident, but for the kind of loneliness betrayal brings. You never confronted him? She asked softly. I did. But in our world, without proof, blood hides its stains well. He rolled back in his chair. I haven't seen him since that day. Haven't spoken a word to anyone about it, until now. There was silence again, but this time, it was not awkward, it was sacred. Thank you for trusting me, Eniton finally said. And I'm sorry. Ejak looked at her then, truly looked. You've been more loyal to me than my own blood, he said. She smiled gently, then resumed her task. That night, as Ejak looked through old photos of his brother and business, he felt the strange warmth of not being alone. Eniton didn't just clean his house, she'd begun cleaning his soul. And while the past still loomed like a shadow, a flicker of light had entered the room. Small. Persistent. Healing. It was a Friday evening when Ejak finally agreed to host an old associate, Chief Omudo, who had helped launch his oil business years ago. The gathering was informal, just drinks, small chops, and nostalgia. Eniton had set the parlor with quiet elegance, placing glass cups and suya platters carefully, ensuring Ejak's medications were within reach. When Omudo arrived with his two sons, the energy shifted. His voice boomed, filled with mock warmth and veiled arrogance. Ejak. Look at you now, he laughed, pouring himself brandy. You used to stand like a lion, now you're wheeled around like an old battery chicken. Ejak chuckled stiffly, but Eniton's hands froze mid-pour. Chief, please, she whispered. But Omudo continued, pointing his glass toward Ejak. This is what pride does. You were warned not to cut your brother out. Look now, he's the one thriving. You've become your own karma. The silence was sharp. Ejak clenched the wheels of his chair, humiliated. The room buzzed with discomfort. Eniton stood slowly, her eyes calm but blazing. Sir, with all due respect, this is not how guests behave, she said firmly. This man built something from nothing. He may be in a wheelchair, but his mind still functions. His name still commands respect. And whether or not he walks, you will not speak to him like he's a beggar on the street. Omudo's sons chuckled mockingly. Look at the Maid. Defender of the weak. Eniton didn't blink. No, sir. Defender of the forgotten. She turned to Chief Ejak. You've done wrong in your past. But no one deserves to be mocked in their lowest season. Her voice trembled but didn't break. A pin-drop silence followed. One of the guests, stunned, recorded a short clip without anyone noticing. Later that night, as the guests drove away, embarrassed and quiet, Ejak turned to her, his voice husky. Why did you do that? She shrugged. Because nobody else would. Hours later, that short clip surfaced online. Loyal mate stands up for her crippled boss, the caption read. The video went viral. Comments poured in, we need more people like her, the way she spoke. Goosebumps. I need an Eniton in my life. But in the mansion, Eniton remained quiet. To her, it wasn't a performance. It was just the right thing to do. And though Ejak didn't say it aloud, a single tear rolled down his cheek that night. Not from pain, but from being seen. By morning, the entire compound was buzzing. Ejak's phone rang endlessly, old friends, business rivals, even media stations requesting interviews. She made you human again, one text read. Ejak stared at the clip repeatedly, watching Eniton's composure, the way her voice never cracked. She's no ordinary maid, he murmured. When his lawyer visited that afternoon, he said, Chief, the internet is calling her the Nigerian Joan of Arc. Maybe we should capitalize on this, turn the pity into power. Ejak waved him off. This wasn't strategy. This was someone doing what I didn't deserve. Eniton continued her duties as if nothing had changed. She cooked, cleaned, and said her morning prayers. She didn't speak about the clip unless asked, and even then, she dismissed it with, I just spoke my truth. For Ejak, though, it was a quiet earthquake. He began observing her more closely, how she hummed while she swept, how she gently corrected the gateman's broken English, how she paused to pray for the neighbor's sick child. One day, as she helped him into the therapy bench, he asked, Eniton, if you had your way, what would you be doing with your life? She looked up, surprised. I'd open a caregiving home, she said. For people abandoned after injury or sickness. Like my uncle. Like you. Jack's throat tightened. That night, he wrote a letter. Not to her, but to his legal trustee. A clause was added to his will. If anything happened to him, Eniton would be the sole custodian of his estate for 5 years, with a budget earmarked to start her dream center. He didn't tell her. Not yet. But when she brought him his evening medication and smiled, something shifted in him again. Thank you, Eniton, he said. Her brows lifted. It was the first time he'd ever said those words. You're welcome, sir, she replied gently. That night, they both slept better than they had in years. The following week, a brown envelope was handed to Eniton by Mr. De Silva, Jack's trustee. Your boss asked me to discuss something with you, he began. Eniton looked puzzled. Inside was a letter, handwritten, trembling but honest. It read, For every insult I ever hurled at you, I leave a portion of my peace. For every tear I caused, I offer a portion of my fortune. Should I leave this earth before I walk again, use what's mine to heal others. For you already healed me. Tears welled in Eniton's eyes. Sir, I don't understand, De Silva smiled. He believes in you. He sees now. Eniton folded the letter carefully and tucked it against her chest. She didn't need the money. She needed him to live. From that day on, Jack became intentional. He let Eniton attend his therapy sessions. He accepted assistance without biting words. He even began writing notes to old friends, apologizing for past arrogance. Meanwhile, Eniton started sketching a rough plan for her dream center. She didn't tell him, but she had already chosen a name, Ifeoluwa Home for Healing. That evening, she found Jack staring out the window. What are you thinking about, sir? She asked. He didn't look at her. About a future I never thought I'd see, he murmured. And a woman I thought was invisible, who ended up saving my soul. Eniton said nothing, just placed her hand gently on his shoulder. In that silence, a bond deeper than loyalty, deeper than duty, was being formed. The tyrant was no more. And the girl from Ijibuode? She was becoming a quiet legend. It was a sunny Tuesday morning when the call came through, an international number Jack hadn't seen in years. The voice on the other end was too familiar, too smooth, too calculated. Jack, it's Dominic, said the man who had once shared his childhood and then shattered his adulthood. I saw the clip. You've become popular. Jack's jaw tightened. What do you want? Dominic chuckled. Can't a brother check in? I'll be in Lagos this week. Let's talk. The line went dead. The room turned cold. Jack hadn't spoken to his brother since the night he confronted him with evidence of the tampered brake line. Now, suddenly, Dominic wanted to reconnect. Right after the world had seen Jack's redemption arc, Eniton walked in and noticed his stiff posture. Is everything all right, sir? She asked. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Just old ghosts, he muttered. By Thursday, Dominic arrived, dressed in designer kaftan, his cologne heavy like his lies. He brought flowers for Eniton and wine for his brother. You look strong, Jack, he said, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. Your girl here, she's a gem. Eniton offered a brief smile but didn't trust his eyes. They were the eyes of a man who smiled with his mouth but schemed with his heart. Over the next 2 days, Dominic stayed in a nearby guest house but visited daily. He played the role of the concerned brother, but Eniton noticed subtle changes. He always asked about Jack's schedule, when his therapy sessions ended, when his drugs were taken. One night, Eniton overheard Dominic on a call outside the kitchen. Yes. Night meds. We just need to switch the tablets. Paralysis will extend, and then ownership's mine. Her blood ran cold. She rushed to the hallway, bumping into Dominic. You heard that? He asked coolly. You wouldn't understand, dear. This is family business. But Eniton's eyes had already recorded everything. She didn't confront Jack immediately. Instead, she kept close watch, checking his medicine trays, locking the fridge when he wasn't around, and secretly recording Dominic's next visit. Her loyalty had already protected Ejack's pride, but now it was about saving his life. She tucked the recording safely into her phone and prayed for wisdom. The next morning, Dominic brought Ejack a smoothie, a peace offering. As he sipped it, Eniton dashed into the room, knocking the cup from his hand. "Don't drink that, sir," she cried. Dominic stood frozen. "She's gone mad," he said, laughing nervously. But Eniton opened her phone and played the recording. The room fell silent. Ejack stared at his brother, betrayed all over again. This time, he didn't weep. He called the police. "Arrest him," he said. "And may the law finish what I couldn't." Eniton, trembling, wiped her hands. Her kindness had just saved his life again. Dominic's arrest was quiet but devastating. The compound gates opened for the police van, and for the first time in years, Ejack watched his brother go without sorrow. "It's over," he said softly, hands resting on his lap. "All the years of silence, anger, the sleepless nights, they end here." Eniton sat beside him, watching his face. "You're free now," she said. But he shook his head. "Freedom isn't just about revenge. It's about forgiveness too. And I'm not there yet." The next morning, the media caught wind of the attempted poisoning. The clip of Eniton's bold confrontation went viral again, this time with captions like "Maid saves billionaire boss from assassination plot." Ejack declined interviews, choosing silence. But he made one call, to a court clerk. "I want to amend my will," he said. "And I want to give a public statement at the hearing." A week later, at the High Court of Lagos, Eniton stood beside Ejack as he gave a powerful speech. "Wealth doesn't protect you from betrayal. And strength doesn't always come from standing, it often comes from those who kneel beside you in your worst seasons." Then he turned to Eniton. "She isn't just my maid. She's my shield. My mirror. My second chance." Cameras clicked, but she kept her head down, respectful and calm. Dominic, now facing trial for attempted murder, didn't say a word. The judge granted Ejack's request for full estate control without family interference and praised Eniton's bravery on record. That night, back at the mansion, Ejack handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a silver brooch in the shape of an eagle. "It belonged to my mother," he said. "She said whoever wore it protected the family's legacy. I believe it's yours now." Eniton wept quietly. Not for the brooch, but because for the first time in her life, someone powerful had acknowledged her worth in front of the world. Ejack, now vulnerable yet reborn, looked at her and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." She smiled. "I never saw a cripple, sir. I saw a man waiting to stand again." That night, the mansion breathed differently, no longer a house of shadows, but a place where healing had begun. And though the world now saw Eniton as a hero, she remained the same woman who believed that sometimes, kindness was louder than power, and more dangerous than poison.
By now, Ejack was no longer the reclusive cripple the world pitied. Thanks to Eniton's unwavering loyalty and the courtroom speech that touched the hearts of many, his public image had shifted dramatically. Brands began reaching out. Health organizations offered to sponsor his therapy. Former employees wrote letters of apology. But Chief Ejack wasn't interested in cameras or second chances from the world. Only from himself. He hosted a private reception in his home, not to celebrate his newfound fame, but to honor the woman who saved him twice. Eniton entered the lounge that evening wearing a simple navy blue dress. She looked startled to find the entire staff applauding her. "I didn't do it for this," she said. Ejack smiled. "That's exactly why you deserve it." He stepped forward slowly, one step with braces, one hand on his walking frame. Gasps filled the room. It was his first public attempt to stand again. "You helped me believe I still had a future," he said. "This house, this wealth, it means nothing without someone to remind you of who you used to be, and who you could still become." Then, in front of everyone, he offered Eniton a formal title, household director and heir to the Care Foundation project. a center he planned to build in her name. She froze, her hands covering her mouth. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Then say yes," Ejike said. "Because this is only the beginning." Cameras flashed, but she didn't notice. All she saw was a man who had once been too broken to feel and now stood because she'd chosen not to walk away. That night, in her small room, Eniton looked in the mirror and whispered, "Mama, I did what you said. I helped someone who hurt." Outside, Ejike sat by the window, a journal in his lap. He wrote for the first time in years. "She didn't just make me walk. She made me see." The mansion was no longer a graveyard of bitterness but a place of rebirth. And Lagos, for once, had a story where kindness, not money, became the strongest force of all. The rhythm of the mansion changed. Where once there had been only the mechanical whir of Ejike's motorized wheelchair, now there were the slow but steady taps of support braces and the rustle of Eniton's steps beside him. With each passing day, Ejike grew stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. He began waking up earlier, requesting specific physical routines, and even started joining Eniton in the garden to watch the hibiscus bloom. "The world looks softer from this angle," he murmured one morning as the sun cast a golden filter across the compound. Eniton glanced at him with a smile. "It always did, sir. You just weren't ready to see it." His laugh, soft and grateful, echoed through the space that once carried only curses. Beyond physical recovery, emotional healing had begun to take root. Ejike reached out to old friends and personally apologized for years of cruelty and arrogance. He called the driver he had once dismissed for being 5 minutes late and offered him a new job. "I was a tyrant, Eniton," he admitted one afternoon, "but I don't want to die as one." She had no grand reply, only a nod, and the gentle press of a warm towel to his knees during therapy. Slowly, she had become more than a caregiver. She was his reflection, his reset button. When he signed over the papers to officially begin the Ifeoluwa Center for Healing, he named Eniton as its founder and chief director. "I was wrong about your worth," he told her. This is me saying I see you." Eniton, overwhelmed, bowed her head. "Thank you for believing in me, sir." "Call me Ejike," he corrected gently. "You've earned that much." And with that, the final crack in his pride gave way to humility. The opening of the Ifeoluwa Center was quiet and dignified. No press, no red carpets, just a small ribbon-cutting ceremony in a renovated bungalow in Yaba, surrounded by wheelchairs, mats, and caregivers in training. Ejike stood beside Eniton, leaning slightly on his cane. "From here," he said, "we give others what the world denied them, dignity." Eniton's speech was brief. "This center is for every forgotten man and woman, for every person told that they were nothing but a burden. We see you, and we will help you stand." The crowd clapped, but Ejike's eyes remained fixed on her. She was no longer just a maid. She was a force, a voice for those who didn't have one. And she hadn't just healed him. She had healed what generations of pride had broken in his lineage. A week later, Ejike's lawyer returned with final documents. "You sure about this, Chief?" he asked. "Absolutely," Ejike nodded. Eniton had become the legal inheritor of part of his company shares, his estate trust, and most importantly, his legacy. When she was handed the documents, she gasped. "Sir, I don't need this. I never wanted this." "I know," he said. "That's why it's yours." She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "My father died thinking we would always be poor," she whispered. "My mother said kindness never goes unpaid. I didn't believe her until now." Ejike knelt beside her, not out of obligation, but out of honor. "Let the world learn," he said, "that a maid taught a billionaire how to be a man again." From that day, she stopped calling him Sir. She called him Ejike. And though people whispered of romance, theirs was something far more rare. A bond carved out of pain, patience, and resurrection. The Grand Hall of the Continental Towers in Victoria Island was filled with dignitaries, entrepreneurs, and government officials. The occasion, the official unveiling of the Ejike and Eniton Foundation for Restorative Living, a project birthed from their shared journey. Eniton walked into the room in a silver-toned native attire, simple yet commanding. Her face glowed not from makeup, but from purpose. Ejike, in a crisp agbada, stood beside her without his cane for the first time. The crowd rose in applause, not just for the foundation, but for the man who once had everything and lost it, then found more through one woman's kindness. When asked to give a final speech, Ejike spoke from the heart. You all knew me as the ruthless Chief Ejike, but I became a man again, not in a boardroom, but in my own living room, because one woman chose compassion over convenience. Eniton stood when I could not, and now we both stand together, not as boss and maid, but as equals. The audience wept, clapped, and chanted her name. She didn't bask in the glory. She simply stepped to the podium and said, "No act of kindness is wasted. Sometimes the world doesn't change overnight, but one heart, one soul, can change everything." That evening, as they sat on the balcony of their old mansion sipping zobo, Ejike turned to her. "Do you regret it? Staying when you could have left?" Eniton shook her head. "Not for a second." He smiled. "Then tell me this, will you stay forever?" Her eyes widened slightly, but her smile never faded. "Only if I can still be myself." Ejike chuckled. "That's all I want." The wind swept through the bougainvillea vines on the rails, and for the first time since his accident, Ejike leaned back in peace. Beside him was not just the woman who stood up for him, but the one who helped him rise again. And together they faced the night, not as broken souls, but as people who had finally learned to stand tall. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and put on post notifications.